Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the time to join our session today. This session will focus on Infor Workforce Management, or what we normally call it WFM for short, in public sector. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to add any questions that you may have. There is a chat box that you can put your questions into. And then we will address it either as we discuss the topic or towards the end, depending on the type of questions. Another thing is that if you look at the presentation here, you can double click on that screen to enlarge it a little bit. So it's a bit easier to see the presentation that way. So just put your mouse over the presentation slide and double click that, and it will automatically enlarge that. All right, so with that, let me start here. My name is Johannes Chiang. I'm a Senior Vice President at Axiom Group. I'm responsible for all delivery or services in US and Canada. I have about 30 years of experience in consulting, particularly technology consulting here, with the last 20 years really spent on workforce management. So I have very extensive Infor workforce management background. I played many different roles from functional consultant, technical consultant, project manager to project oversight now for large and complex engagement here. So with that, let me start out. If you can just go to the next slide here about Axiom. Let me start by describing who Axiom is. Axiom Group is founded by a group of us who worked for WorkBrain in the past. WorkBrain was a company that developed this workforce management system that Infor is running now, Infor WFM, prior to acquisition by Infor here. We focus only on workforce management, so we have very narrow focus, but we have very, very deep experience. We don't do other areas of HCM. We normally partner with companies like RPI and others to do the rest of HCM. So we focus solely on workforce management. We are a global company, and we have presence in US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. So far, we have completed about 350. More than 350 Infor workforce management implementation globally. When I say implementation, that includes upgrades, that includes enhancement, things like that. We have clients in public sector, as you can see here, the logos there. Myrtle Beach, City of Myrtle Beach, County of San Mateo, Yolo County in California, Tennessee Valley, Government of Gibraltar, Queensland government in Australia. So we have a number of public sector clients here. But also we work with other industries, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, hospitality, others. We even have clients in a law firm as our client here. So we have a broad presence across different industries. Other than implementation and upgrade, we also do managed services. And the reason I mention this because normally what happens is that after the implementation is done or upgrade is completed, then the client continue to engage us doing managed services. That's a production support, either just purely support, and some clients actually ask us to provide 24/7 support, or other type of enhancement that we continue doing for them. So that's kind of who Axiom is. We are the longest tenured Infor partner for WFM implementation. With me today, as you see in the screen, is Al Asgharian. He's a delivery director at Axiom Group as well. So with that, I will turn it to Al to introduce himself. Al.
Sure. Thank you, Johannes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am a delivery director with Axiom Group. I have over 19 years of experience implementing technology solutions, with the past 15 years dedicated to workforce management implementations and consulting around that. That includes HR, time and attendance, payroll, budgeting, forecasting, schedule optimizations, and labor standards associated with those. So I hope the session today is interactive, and we would like you to ask questions. So please feel free to put in your questions in the chat box if you have any questions, and we'll get to those either as we go through the presentation or maybe at the end. So with that, Johannes, I want to ask you a couple of questions here regarding two of the logos that I see on the screen. County of San Mateo and Yolo County, these were two projects that I believe they were kind of a rescue project, if I'm not mistaken. And can you provide some additional insight into the challenges of these two projects and how we mitigated the risk on these projects?
Sure. Let's talk about Yolo County first. And if you can just flip to the next page out.
Sure.
Right. So Yolo County, right? You're right. Both of this, Yolo County and County happens to be in California. Both of them were rescue projects. We came into this project halfway through, right? So we did not start. Somebody else started. For one reason or another, the project was stopped. And then they call us, and then they wanted us to take a look and assess and recommend the next steps and take the project to completion. So those were what we meant by rescue projects there. So let's talk a little bit more about YOLO here. YOLO began the implementation and then went through all the way to, I think, beginning of testing when the project was stopped. Project wasn't going as well as they expected, right? When it came to testing, they realized that a lot of functionality did not work according to the design. So that's when they decided to pause the project and ask us to come in. So what we did was that we came in, we reviewed the project plan, obviously, and then the requirement against the configuration at that particular point and the design as well, right? What we found is that a lot of the requirements were not properly translated to the system requirements. I think we felt that a lot of the requirements were done, the business requirements were there, but the way the system was configured mostly based on the technical interpretation rather than the business and processes that were well understood. So, I think the consultant just look at the system and ask the client, how do you want me to configure this application? And that's exactly what happened. So when it came to testing, the client realized this is not what our requirements were all about. And a lot of things were missed. Obviously, not everything was missed. There are things that were working, but the client felt that that was too far off. So when we came in, we took a look at this. We reviewed the requirements again with the client from both the business and the operational processes, right? And then we took a look at the configuration. We had to refine the configuration. And that's what we did. And then in some cases, we had to redesign some of the functionality as well to address the business requirement. So that was YOLO. And then we were able to take it to the completion. Obviously, we did the testing again with the client, and they say, yep, this was good. And the client signed off on that. And we continue on, and we completed the implementation. With YOLO, as with many other clients, after the project was done, actually, we continued the relationship to this day. They sign up our managed services contract, and we have providing additional enhancement and support with them. In fact, we have active work at this point with YOLO still through managed services. So that's YOLO. So why don't we, can you go to the next slide, and I can talk about County of San Mateo then.
Sure.
Yeah. So County of San Mateo, different problems, right? basically same situation. The implementation was initiated or started by someone else. Actually, they went to the pilot at that point, but for a small group of employees there. But the challenge was that when the pilot was done, was running, and pilot was in production actually, they wanted to add additional employees because the pilot was just a subset of their employees, right? That's when the problem came up. What the system couldn't handle it. The system couldn't scale. So at that point, the performance really suffered. So they pull it back and they actually asked us to say, can you take a look at this? Again, similar situation. We came in, we assess, we look at, again, the requirements, the design, the configuration, right? But this was a different problem because they took it obviously far further down the road because it was a pilot and they could take it to pilot. What we found was it's kind of similar but slightly different. The requirements were well understood, but the focus again mostly on the technical configuration and the customization of the software, right? And Infor at that time, because this was on premise, can be extended and so on and so forth. So they did that. What we found is they purely look at the configuration alone. Business processes were not addressed. There were so many inefficient processes in addition to the overly complex customization. I give you an example of efficient processes, time capture, for example. Because they came in from manual paper base, right? So they used to have a timekeeper who collected all the timesheet and then they will enter it to the system. They did not change that, although they have automated system with time capture capability, but they did not do that. So, time capture was still collected by timekeepers who will then enter now into Infor WFM. So when you look at from the processes alone, that is so inefficient, right? Another thing was that the customization. It was very heavy customization. Again, not looking so much on the business processes, but looking at individual requirement. That creates performance issue, because you can do that if it's small. But once you get a lot of employees in the system, then the calculation becomes very heavy, and then it will tax the system that way. So that's what happened. When we work with them, then we look at the processes. For example, on the time capture process, we say, well, look, there are a few different ways to do that, and they chose to go to the time clocks actually, so to capture the time. So employee can just punch in, punch out, can put their leave request through there. That alleviate a lot of problems in terms of manually re-entering the time. Not to mention the errors, right? The potential errors, because if somebody else entering your time, there could be a potential for errors there. So the time clocks was there. And then we look at the customization. Yeah, look at the customization. Say, how can we normalize the customization? How can we simplify it? At the same time, still address the business requirements that they have there. Because some of the customization was to handle processes, not about the rules, because the rules are the rules, particularly in unionized environment, right? You cannot really simplify the rules. You have to respect that, and you have to calculate it exactly the way the agreement was written, right? So that's okay. But customization around the processes, that's what we simplify, right? Once we've done that, then we deploy to additional employees, no problem. Before that, the pilot was, I think, was less than 1,000 employees. So imagine, 1,000 employees not big for a workforce management system, right? But it couldn't really run well. Now they have thousands and thousands of employees in there. It is fine. As same like YOLO, County of San Mateo is still our client today. After the implementation was done, they sign up for managed services contract that we help them with additional enhancement, additional maintenance there. In fact, we did an upgrade for them as well, not part of managed services, but part of a bigger project, because it was a significant effort there, right? So that's County of San Mateo. As we say here at Axiom, right? It's not about WFM software. The software works, the product works. it is what you do with it. So it's very important that you look at not from necessarily from the technology perspective alone. Look at it from the business processes. Look at it from the business requirements, right? These two initial implementation failed because it was the focus was so much on the product rather than on the business process and the requirements, and figure out how to leverage or take advantage of the products there. So those are the two examples. Now I've got some questions with you as well. You've done quite a few public sector, right? Workforce management implementation and upgrade and whatnot.
Correct.
We normally see challenges when this project don't reach their full potential. So I want to ask that question to you. Why do you see that? What's the reason for that? Is it the wrong software? Is it the wrong consulting firm? Or is it something different?
Well, great question. I think there is no denying that the public sector is complicated, right? Public sector is like a single employer that covers many different industries. For example, right now we are implementing for state of New Hampshire the workforce management system, and obviously they have many different agencies under a big umbrella on top that basically are in, like, we're dealing with the Department of Corrections, and then we're dealing with the police department, and then we're dealing with the fire department. We're also dealing with hospitals that they have. So if you look at it, each of these industries or sub-agencies of usually a public sector has distinctly different business needs and processes. In many cases, they may have even a lot of complex unions. In many cases, actually, they have it, right? So to add to that complexity that I just mentioned, the union makes it, again, another unique requirement that is very specific to that one agency. Whether you're a state, city, or a county, obviously having a centralized or decentralized human resources, payroll, finance, all of these will impact the project and the approach that needs to be taken. So to answer your question, it could be a combination of everything. But at the end of the day, if you look at these projects as a transformation and not only a technology implementation, these projects would be much more successful. And by transformation, I mean you gotta make sure that you have the people, process, technology aspects or disciplines of these projects covered, meaning you mentioned in YOLO and CSM, both of them suffered from process improvements that have not been identified as you go through this. So the final product did not produce the outcome that was expected.
For the explanation, many times when you look at this, right? I mean, the clients need to realize that they're buying a new system, a new software, right? So it's not like automating the old process. They may come from manual processes, and there's certainly there are reasons for that, right? I mean, in the case of CSM, like I said before, one of the things is that sometimes I say, hey, I need multiple authorization here for the same timesheet, right? Just because when you paper trail, right, you have to have that steps to make sure everything is okay. But in the system, it's different, right? Because particularly Infor and others too, Infor has a very good tracking audit records in the system. So when you authorize it, it will know, somebody can always check who authorizes that one, who make the change to the timesheet, right? When it was made and what was the change itself, right? So this kind of things, I think that the clients need to think about, hey, this is a new system. How can we take advantage of that? Particularly if they come from manual system, because there are reasons for those multiple approval, for example. But with the new system, let's figure out how to make it more efficient, not from the calculation perspective, but also from the process perspective. Now, another question I have for you, Al, is project goals and objective, and we normally we talk a lot about this, right? How important is it that a clear definition of a project goals and objective for this project, particularly in public sector here?
By far, the most resounding complaint in the public sector is that the projects do not seem to get to a point of closure or producing tangible results that was expected. Projects, by definition, they are temporary, right? And they should have a tangible end. In this environment, projects seem to go either indefinitely or maybe stopped because before completion, right? And this issue of ongoing projects is a result of either poor project definition or a misunderstanding of the delineation between projects and operations. So truly clear expression of the project goals and objectives is one of the most critical success factors of these type of projects, because that's going to drive all the decisions on the projects that are made, right? It makes actually the decision making much easier because now you have a goal and you have a guiding principle that goes along with your project that could make those decisions much easier. If you're baffled to make a decision around a policy, for example, and changing that policy is not really aligned with the objectives of the project, that becomes a mute discussion, right? It makes it a much easier discussion to have. So again, obviously the goals and objectives are very important, but you talked about also the process, business process changes. That is also another very important aspect of this. We understand that when working with public sector, obviously all the union roles and everything else that kind of ties your hand in terms of being able to change processes or maybe policies at times and try to standardize those things across these sub divisions or sub agencies of a public sector. However, we can find the right balance. There are good decisions that can be made from a design perspective that would result in a nimble solution that would be much easier to maintain in the future. So looking at these different agencies in silos obviously will result in a multiple configurations that you have to maintain later. But if you look at them holistically and there is willingness and flexibility to adapt or change some of the business processes, that makes sense to do, and harmonize some of those policies, that would lead to a much better, nimble, easier to maintain solution.
All right. Another thing that we talk about a lot is really planning and scope management, right? I mean, when we talk about this, I think clients talk about upfront planning, not only the planning throughout the project, but really upfront planning, scope management as well as resource planning. So how important are these factors here?
Yeah, that's another very important success factor, in my opinion. One of the things that I almost see on every project is that obviously the client that we work with, they have day jobs, and they need to fully understand what commitment is needed from them to make the project successful. In many projects, we do a great job of going in, creating a schedule for our team and defining what we do versus what the vendor does as well. That level of details is also needed on the client side. So they know exactly, for example, during unit testing or doing functional testing, I would say, what is the commitment needed from them? Can they afford to spend 40 hours a week, for example, on those certain weeks that are needed? And if not, if we identify these things right off the bat in the beginning of the project, we can be proactive about it. We can have a schedule in place that is feasible. We could work with the client to ensure that we meet their expectations. At the same time, they understand the expectations from them. So I think that is very key, to have all the parties in the project fully understand the need from a resource perspective and during different phases of the project. I would say one other thing I would say that it's also important and along the same line is the uh, any discussions of matters affecting operations, right? Maybe changes to the processes, maybe changes to policies and all that within the public sector would be incomplete if the effect of the politics is not addressed. The role of politics is big. We have to address it, and that's more of a change management that needs to be in place to be able to take care of that. But that needs to be addressed, and it is a success factor for the project.
Right. Well, you mentioned the change management. I think that's kind of lead me to my next question. I mean, change management and training, right? I mean, training is normally given because with the user new system, users need to be trained anyway. But talk a little bit more about this too, change management and training, about how they will determine the success of a project here.
Yeah, it is. Change management is really, to me, is as important as anything else that you do in the system. No matter what you do with the system, no matter how great of a design and a configuration you have in place, if the end users are not using the system the way it's intended, the project will fail. So it really takes more than a healthy design and a configuration to realize the benefits of a WFM implementation. Without a doubt, in today's modern WFM systems promise real-time insights into higher productivity and streamlined business processes, but no amount of bells and whistles can replace the employee buy-in. Again, it is the WFM projects usually tend to touch many different people in the company, from HR to payroll to finance to the employees themselves to the managers, supervisors. All of those will be touched by the WFM system. And obviously, any changes to the business processes need to be handled by a strong change management and comprehensive change management program that addresses their concerns and ensures that these stakeholders feel comfortable taking on the new processes, feel comfortable using the new system along with the new features that are in there. Training plays a role in here, obviously, but in many cases, I when I talk to our clients, they think of change management as training. That is, training is a component of change management. But change management is truly when you assess what your stakeholders, how your stakeholders are impacted, how you come up with a communication plan to address those concerns. And again, having an overall OCM plan or a roadmap that considers all these communications, FAQs, job aids, everything that you want to make available to the employee or the end users or impacted users, that makes them feel comfortable and understand how to use the new system in the way it's intended.
All right, and I think, based on my experience as well, when we talk about training particularly, right? I mean, a lot of people tend to think that, hey, I need user manuals to describe all the field or every field on the screen here. So you end up with like very, very thick book explaining how the system works. I think that's something that I think we need to pay attention to. It's because when they look at that thick manual, they say, wow, this is a difficult system to use, right? How do I use it if I have to read all through this? So it's very important when you do the training, when you design the training, to see, hey, how do we make it easier for the user so they can find what they need quickly? And normally what we focus on is what's the most frequently executed or used task. And that's what they need to do it over and over again. And that's when they need a very quick reference. Okay, here's how you do it. So I think that's an important aspect of the training that sometimes, when we design it, we really need to pay attention to that. How do we use it? How do they use it? How easy is it to use it? Not just providing tons of information that it's very difficult to navigate through.
Correct. And usually, I mean, I'm going to expand on that a little bit. What we do usually is our training material that are fully tailored really to every client we create them for. It's very much day in life based training material where for example, if there's a training material created for a supervisor, and they have some daily tasks, some weekly tasks, and some other ongoing admin tasks, it's usually flows that way, and it feels like, okay, I exactly can find my daily activities in here. So the way it's going to be structured, all of that, and how it needs to be rolled out, and who's going to roll it out, all of that will be in the training strategy that we set at the beginning of the project. So that's another aspect of the OCM, is to determine what's the most effective way of training the people. What's the strategy around it? Are we going to do train the trainer sessions? Are we going to do videos? Are we like all of that will be hashed out in the training. Obviously, every organization we deal with, we try to follow what has worked in the past, right? And so with that, the training strategy can be different company by client by client. So yeah, you're absolutely right that how effective that training is a very important aspect of the project that needs to be considered in the training strategy.
Yeah, and another thing that I've been thinking as you talk about this is in particular in public sector, right? What makes public sector somewhat unique than other is we dealing with a lot of departments, right? It could be police, fire, parks and recreation, IT, admin, you name it, right? There's so many of them, and they operate. They have different processes, procedure, a policy, and they have their own approval or authority, if you will, there. So decision making is one of the things that we normally work with our clients in public sectors, right? And decision making process. Can you talk a little bit more about this process and what our clients can do to manage that to be more effective and efficient?
Yeah. Again, we talked about it. We hit this a little bit at the beginning of the project. Clients will come across points in the project that they have to make critical decisions, because usually these products like WFM, workforce management products, we are trying to automate some of the manual processes. Along with those automations, using a new tool, there will be a need for creation of new policies or new things that our clients have never thought about before, because they were never using it that way, right? It's very, very important that we have our clients have a trusted implementation partner along their side that has insight into how these have solved in the past. They bring in the domain expertise and the industry expertise to be able to help them to time so it doesn't impact the projects. A lot of projects that we're in, a lot of good talks around standardizations, a lot of good talk about changes to the processes, but it sometimes causes major delays on the projects because of not to make a decision on those. And I think the critical part in here is that if you have a implementation partner that has the knowledge and has done this in the past and knows the best practices in that area, that consulting firm should be able to help you make the right decision for your organization and speed up that process drastically. That's what we do on our projects. We call it a situation assessment, where every time we have a case that needs a lot of assessment and needs a lot of thought behind it to be able to reach a decision, we build a situation assessment. We highlight what the issue is. We talk about the different options to address that issue. We talk about the pros and cons of each of those options, and we have a recommendation usually at the end that says, well, we've seen this with these clients in the same industry. We've seen good results with this approach or this option. And we provide that recommendation to our clients, walk them through it. And that way our clients are able to make decisions much faster and be able to hopefully not hold up the project and be able to still keep the momentum of the project and move on and be able to realize the benefits of these projects.
All right, we have I think 3-4 minutes left here. Why don't we just go to the next slide and then trying to wrap this up?
Sure.
So these are other public sector clients that we have. TVA is really an upgrade project, wasn't really implementation. This is Tennessee Valley Authority in Tennessee. It was a very, very complex upgrade. What we did here is that, and it was completed, I think it was last year or the year before, with lots of employees in there, but the amount of customization when we came to the upgrade here was unbelievable. It was over 1,200 customization. So part of the upgrade really to simplify that as well, because it wasn't working well. That process to check processes to make sure other calculations are correct. So that's what we did at Tennessee Valley. We have projects, still active projects now at the city of Myrtle Beach, and then state of New Hampshire. Al, you manage state of New Hampshire. Why don't you talk a bit more about this in a minute or so here?
Sure, I'll be quick. State of New Hampshire is an in-flight project that we're dealing with. We're almost 3/4 of the way in. It's about 3,000 employees in total. We're dealing with correction facilities, fire department, police, and hospitals. Initially, our rollout is for the correction facilities, and then it's going to be followed by the other ones. It's a full-scale implementation of time and attendance, accruals, and scheduling. And again, this is something we're doing right now. The impact of COVID was interesting on our project because we had to switch or actually adapt to a new environment where everything is virtual, and be able to still be as effective as client facing that we usually are during discovery and design. And going through that, at the beginning, there was obviously a little bit of adjustments that we needed to make, but it's working perfectly fine. We've come up with a new approach around our discovery and design that is very effective, and we have been able to meet our milestones on this project, and we're on track so far. So if there are any questions, and I thank everybody for joining us today. If there are any questions, please feel free to send us an email. And the email addresses for myself and Johannes is on the screen.